Welcome, witches.
I'm Candy.
And I'm Jen.
And we're the Cornfield Coven.
All right. So we've got a very special case we're covering today. It is the unsolved double murder of 10-year-old Lyric Cook-Morrissey and 8-year-old Elizabeth Collins from Evansdale, Iowa. This episode is being released on July 13th, 2026, in honor of the last day the girls saw their families. So today is the 14th anniversary of their abduction. In today's episode, we're going to cover the case, and then on Wednesday, which is our regular episode drop day, we'll be releasing an episode featuring exclusive interviews with Heather Cook and Drew Collins, who are Elizabeth's parents. We cannot thank them enough for their participation in this project. They are amazing people. And we're just so grateful that they wanted to take part in this. Sources for these episodes include, of course, Heather and Drew, the Taken Together documentary, and various news sources. And I highly recommend watching the Taken Together documentary on Max.
That was very eye-opening and very... Yeah.
Yeah. It's so much work went into that, and you can tell. So we'll go ahead and get started. Lyric Cook-Morrissey was the 10-year-old daughter of Dan Morrissey and Misty Cook, high school sweethearts who had gotten married young. Though the relationship didn't work out, they were both still committed to Lyric. And Lyric was loving but tough, gentle but stubborn, kind and feisty. She loved to sing and was doing it constantly, usually off-key. And one of her very best friends was her 8-year-old cousin, Elizabeth Collins. Elizabeth was the second of 4 children born to Drew and Heather Collins. And Elizabeth was just sheer joy. She was always bubbly and smiley. She especially loved holidays, even smaller ones. And so that was something, that everyone really remembers about her, is how much she loved to celebrate the smallest moments. Misty and Heather are sisters, about a year apart in age. Their daughters were so close, they seemed more like sisters than cousins.
I would say when I was watching it and listening to the interviews and stuff, that's what it seemed like. They were very, very close, and every time I just think of the poor grandma. I mean,
yeah.
Anyways,
yes. Both girls were growing up in the small town of Evansdale, a safe place with a population under 5,000. Drew and Heather were raising their family in town, while Lyric and Misty were living with Misty and Heather's mom, Wilma Cook, nearby. So now we're going to get to the date in question. On Friday, July 13th, 2012, Drew left for work early, and Elizabeth climbed in bed with Heather as she was wont to do. Misty had to work at 9 a.m., so Wilma took Lyric to Heather's house so the girls could spend some time together. When Heather left the house for a while, she told both girls that she loved them. None could have imagined it would be the last time she'd speak with them. It was a hot summer day, and Lyric and Elizabeth wanted to go for a bike ride around noon. Wilma told the girls not to go too far as she was making lunch, and Misty would be off work soon and planned to pick Lyric up and take her to the pool. A while later, Wilma called Misty, concerned that the girls had not returned from their bike ride. Misty assumed the girls would be close by, but she started for Heather's house. When Heather returned and learned the girls had not been home, she feared something was very wrong. Before long, Drew came home and thought maybe they'd gone to a friend's house. So everyone is just becoming aware of the situation. Everyone's got different feelings about what may or may not be wrong. But there was definitely some parental intuition there, especially on the part of Heather. They all began searching for the girls, driving around, calling friends. They could not find them anywhere. So at 2:42 p.m., Heather walked into the Evansdale police station and reported her worst nightmare to Police Chief Kent Smock. So this is about 2.5 hours.
Wow.
I mean, they did not wait around. They really felt, these are responsible girls. They wouldn't.
This is out of character.
This is out of character, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
So everyone hoped that the girls had stopped somewhere with air conditioning to get out of the high 90s temps. I mean, it was the dog days of summer here. But the report was immediately taken seriously. Police started knocking on doors of friends' houses and then going door to door. Firemen and citizens joined the search. So people are looking all over town for the girls. At about 5 p.m., Drew received a phone call from the police. They wanted him to come down to Myers Lake because they had found 2 bicycles and they wanted to know if he could identify them. Myers Lake is about a mile from the Collins house. So the girls knew that they weren't supposed to go that far. And though they'd been to Myers Lake before, the parents weren't at all sure that the girls would know how to get there.
Yeah.
If they got there, it might have been
by fluke or
by happenstance, yeah. So Heather and Misty were together when Drew called to confirm that they'd found not only the girls' bikes, but Elizabeth's Hannah Montana purse containing her phone, which appeared to have been thrown over a fence. Now, Drew did clarify that this was a phone that it wasn't hooked up to service. She could play games on it.
Take pictures.
Yeah, exactly. But the perpetrator wouldn't know that and would want to get rid of it, for purposes of GPS. So Heather said her first thought at this revelation was just, they're gone. Heartbreaking.
Mother's intuition.
Yes. The bikes were found on an isolated stretch of the trail around Myers Lake. Really, most of the trail is pretty open, and this is the most isolated section.
I was going to say, I don't remember when I was reading on this, were the bikes camouflaged in any way? Like, did they try hiding them? They just kind of shoved them off to the side?
Yeah, they were just kind of off to the side by a fence.
Okay, so I didn't know.
I believe, and so this is the area where there's kind of heavy timber in between the trail and the highway.
Okay.
And I believe Drew said, it's a little bit more open there now, but at this point, this really was, the only stretch of this trail that's really sort of hidden from the rest of the trail. It's not wide open. So authorities were immediately concerned that the girls had gone swimming to escape the heat and could have drowned in the lake. Now, while it's important to rule this out, Heather did mention that she had a strong feeling that they weren't in the lake. They would have found shoes. No kid is gonna, they might go in with their clothes, but no kid is hopping into a lake with their shoes on.
And nobody wants to walk back to their bikes with squishy, wet shoes.
Yes, exactly. So they dragged this section of the lake. They had divers in there for over an hour. They performed 2 infrared searches by air. So nothing was found initially, but that wasn't enough to completely rule out the lake at this time, and they still felt that they needed to do that. And I think it's good that they did that. I mean, they were still exploring other avenues, but ruling out that lake is important because otherwise it would always be in the back of your mind that what if. Yeah.
Exactly. It's checking off all the things on the list so you never have that guilt feeling of, why didn't I check that first? Or, I mean, it just helps with any thought you, parent, grandparent, search and rescue person might have. Right.
So searches continued until 9 or 10 p.m. that night, and then they would resume again in the morning. So the next day, we're at Saturday, July 14th. There was a huge response to the disappearance of Lyric and Elizabeth. Investigators from Waterloo Police, Cedar Falls Police, Blackhawk County Sheriff's Department, the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation, DCI, and the FBI joined the effort. The case was headline news across the national media, including like Nancy Grace. It was immediate.
And Nancy Grace is a mother.
Yeah.
Of two little, well, now they're adults, but, or older. But anyways, she's a mom. So that mom heartstrings tug hard, and she will like to do everything she can.
Right, to get it out there. Yep. There were hundreds of volunteers walking through fields and wooded areas in the heat, because remember, this heat is not breaking. Dan, who's Lyric's father, took his four-wheeler out in the search. You know, he figured he could get to some places.
Yep. A little more farther and off the beaten path.
Yes. Aircraft with infrared technology continued to conduct searches, but they didn't pick up anything bigger than a squirrel. So video surveillance was, of course, available in 2012, but it wasn't as standard as it is today.
Drones were just coming out back then, weren't they?
I think
they were just out in rougher models, not like the high-tech ones we have today.
Right, that technology advanced so fast. But just video surveillance from businesses, from homes, from traffic lights. It wasn't anything like it is today. You know, even though it's only been 14 years, so many people have Ring cameras. And you see that in so many investigations anymore, you know, like you can track somebody's movements for blocks and blocks and blocks because there's a Ring camera on every other house.
Ring cameras scare me. I mean, I love that they're helpful, but I don't want to know if somebody was peeking in my window or on my porch. It's like, just do it and don't tell me. Like,
so it was available, but it wasn't nearly as standard as it is today. So there was a local business near the Collins home with footage of the girls riding their bikes shortly after noon. Though they had hoped for more, this was at least helpful in nailing down some timelines and confirming Lyric and Elizabeth's clothing that day. And then there were many eyewitnesses that reported seeing the girls at different points in time, different places in Evansdale that day. You know, there were some neighbors that they rode by and said hi to, and, you know, just haunting.
Well, I would say there was that older gentleman.
Yes.
That said he always loved it when the girls went by because they would say hi and ask him how his day was and stuff like that. And that was hurt. Like when I watched that episode with him in it, it kind of like, it made me sad for him too. Like, those girls were such a part of that community. Like, they were nice to everybody. And
this rocked the community.
I was going to say, they were noticed.
Yeah.
Listen. Yep. They weren't just kids that were like, oh yeah, that's so, I think I see him every so often up the road. They were young ladies that they're like, somebody would have said, they didn't drive or ride their bikes by today.
Yeah.
Oh, they must be gone, or, you know.
Yeah. So several tips came in about a white van, and, you know, it seems like white vans always come up in these cases. And the authorities even said that because...
What's it always the creepy white van?
It's always the creepy white van. Yeah. But nevertheless, they followed up on every one of these tips. But unfortunately, nothing came from them. They also started looking at the sex offender registry. Now, this registry is available to everyone, and an M on the map indicates the offense was committed with a minor. So they started collecting all those names and then collecting cell phone tower data on all of these offenders to see if they could place them in the area. Unfortunately, there are a lot. So it was a lot to go through.
I've looked around the area here, and I'm like, oh, gosh. I mean, at least right here where I'm at now, it's not. But across the bridge, I was just like, wow. Yeah. But, I mean, at least they're identified. People are aware. Well, I guess I wasn't.
Yeah.
But, there's tools. But
yes.
It's, yeah.
On July 16th, 3 days in, they announced that they would be draining Myers Lake. So they did that. Nothing was found, but now the lake could actually be ruled out, which is an important step. Of course, in these situations, another important step is that the family needs to be ruled out. And unfortunately, that it would cause division in the families. Drew and Heather cooperated fully, took polygraphs, handed over anything that was asked for, were available constantly. But Dan and Misty had a different past with the police and felt they were treated differently because of it. I think there was probably some distrust on both ends here. Dan and Misty had both previously served time for felony drug charges. Misty was 8 months pregnant with Lyric when she picked up a federal drug charge for activity she says took place before she was pregnant. She was sentenced to 3 years for conspiracy to manufacture meth when Lyric was about 18 months old. And so at that point, Misty went into a federal prison in West Virginia, and she got out when Lyric was about 4. And then really, I think, started working on cleaning things up.
I was going to say, she missed out
on
a lot of major important things. And that can kind of clean a person up, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And then at the time of the girls' abduction, Dan was awaiting trial on charges of manufacturing and dealing meth. He had actually been in jail awaiting trial for about 6 months, but had bonded out about a month before the girls went missing. So the day before the girls' abduction, Dan had been negotiating a plea deal for 30 years. But as authorities wanted him to begin the sentence immediately, he declined. He wouldn't have been able to go home, get any affairs in order, say goodbye, give hugs, do any of that. It would have been, you're going right now. So he declined.
But doesn't that make you look more guilty?
I don't know.
I get why he did it. I get why he did it, but...
Yeah. He had really hoped that the plea would work out. Yeah. So he was pretty upset about it. And Lyric could sense that he was sad, so she gave him a big hug and told him that she loved him. And that really helped him in the moment, and that was the last time he saw her. Oh. So, I mean, at least it's a positive memory that he has to take with her. Yeah. So there's definitely a different relationship here that the police have with Dan and Misty than they do with Drew and Heather. And like I said, I really think there was distrust on the part of Dan and Misty, and there's distrust coming from the police as well. And the investigators have to look into the drug connections to determine if there's any possibility of a connection to what happened to Lyric and Elizabeth. They wouldn't be doing their jobs if they didn't. They have to look into that. And we have to think to what kind of criminal element we're dealing with, because there are differences. For example, the mob doesn't touch families. Typically, they have a rule. But the cartel, do not have that rule.
they'll anybody in the path. Anybody that has witnessed. Anybody that knows something.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the cartel is involved here.
No.
I'm just saying it's understandable they have to look into the possibility that there's a connection.
Each thing on the list.
Exactly. Just like when a wife is murdered, they got to look at the husband first.
Yep.
They have to. They got to go with the odds. So, Missy was clean at the time, but Dan was honest that he was still using drugs. And they both took polygraph tests that came back inconclusive. Now, if they knew that Dan was on drugs at the time, I don't believe he should have been allowed to take a polygraph, because even they'll ask you like what kind of prescription drugs you're on, like antidepressants, because physiologically they can interfere with the results. Yep. And I don't like polygraphs. So we've gone over that before.
I wish they would work 100%, like yes or no.
Yeah, but they're never going to.
Nope.
So Dan and Misty said the authorities outright accused them of killing the girls, and that's why they stopped cooperating. But eventually Dan cleaned up. They both passed polygraphs. But this wasted a lot of time, and it caused division and friction between the authorities and the parents, between the two sets of parents, because they're having a hard time understanding, why aren't you just giving the police what they need? Why are we wasting all this time? Because they have to rule you out. They're still looking into other things, but, we're wasting time getting you ruled out. And Dan and Misty felt the same way. You're wasting time on me. We didn't do it. So there was a lot of animosity there.
They're feeling that they're wasting time focusing on them instead of actually looking for...
Right, exactly. Drugs. Yep. So 9 days in, on July 22nd, an FBI spokesperson made a public announcement that they believe the girls are alive. Not much is publicly known. There's never been any information released about why this statement was made or what was behind it. But when you know the outcome, it's heart-wrenching. Of course, there are rare cases where children are abducted and kept alive for weeks, months, even years. And of course, that's what everyone was hoping for. But it just seemed like a very strange move to me to definitively say, like, we believe they're alive. Yeah. That it just seemed odd. In October, so we're 3 months in, investigators told Drew and Heather that they didn't need to meet with them every day anymore. While they understood this was really difficult for them because it had become a part of their routine, and you got to do what you got to do to get through every day, and routines are very helpful. So I think that was hard.
Well, and then hearing, okay, we're at a certain point where we don't need to see you every day or talk to you every day. As a mother or a parent, to me, that's like them saying, yeah, we think that they're gone. We're going to start, we have to focus on, and yes, they have to focus on other cases and other issues.
Right.
But as a parent who wants their child.
Yes.
You're being told.
Yeah. Right. However, Drew especially had become very close with Dan Trelka, who was the Waterloo police chief at the time. Trelka was very involved with the case, and he remains close with Drew. So now we're up to November. We are 4 months in, and all the parents got together and released a letter that they wrote to the kidnapper. It read, "To whom it may concern, we could use your name, but we don't know who you are, or maybe we do. Maybe you are someone who knows the girls. Maybe you are someone who just acted upon an impulse. Maybe you plan to take them. We don't know because we don't know who you are. Maybe we can sort of imagine that you must not have had the things you needed growing up to feeling safe and loved, because only someone who hurts inside would hurt another person and their family. Taking the girls from us has caused much pain. Pain for them, pain for us and our families. Since the time you took them, maybe you've wondered more than a few times how you could ever make it right, how to be the hero, not the monster. We want you to know that we are praying for you to do the right thing. By releasing the girls, everyone wins, even you. Imagine how it would feel to have everyone remember that you were the one person in all the missing cases who cared enough to let the girls go. Our lives have not been the same since July 13th. Please let our girls come home to us. Please do the right thing. Be a hero. Sincerely, Drew and Heather, Dan and Misty."
Wow.
Yeah, so then the next month, December 5th, 2012, almost 5 months, about 145 days. It was warmer weather and the last day of the hunting season. Kevin Dramstad and Amanda Miller were taking advantage of it, spending the day in Seven Bridges Wildlife Area. Now, Seven Bridges is about 20 miles northeast of Evansdale. It's near Reedland and Wapsie Valley High School, if you're kind of familiar with that area. It is an isolated area. You would need to have some familiarity with to know it was there or to navigate it.
Okay.
However, it is also known to authorities and criminals. For example, I think it was Dan Trelka who said if they heard about a burglary, authorities knew they may want to go look for a safe out in Seven Bridges because it was like kind of a drop site.
Oh.
So anyway, that day, Kevin says something kept pulling him deeper into the park. He wasn't sure what, he just had a strong feeling that he needed to keep going. And normally they wouldn't have gone that deep in. But then pink cloth drew his attention. He pulled it back and saw a human skull, and he stumbled back in horror. From there, his eyes just kept taking in new horrors. Another skull, a shoe, more and more remains scattered all over the area. So they called 911 and an officer came out quickly. He confirmed they were dealing with human remains of at least 2 individuals, and they appeared to be children. It was time to call everyone in. They were pretty sure they had found Lyric and Elizabeth.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know, I guess if you were in this job, finding remains is part of it.
Right.
And you learn to cope with that or accept it. But I could never imagine, and I bet they can never, having to find children's remains.
Yes.
That's got to hit differently.
Yes. It was just awful. So according to a prearranged plan, Dan Trelka, being the closest to the families, called them and asked them to come to Evansdale City Hall. Drew didn't know about this plan, but he did know that if the girls were found alive, the plan was to rush them to Iowa City. So he figured, you can put the, 2 and 2 equals 4. He was able to do the math. He figured if he was being called to City Hall, they were probably not alive. Trelka knew at this point that the girls had most likely found them, but he admits that he lied when Drew asked and just said, we need to wait for Evansdale Chief Kent Smock.
He was trying to be a friend and
yeah.
Because what if they were alive and he tells them they're not, and he's just holding out hope.
Right. Yep. So Evansdale Chief Kent Smock delivered the news and said it was probably the most difficult notification he's ever had to do. Which makes sense. And the next day it snowed. If Kevin hadn't found the girls that day, it could have been months or even years before they were found. And of course, this was not the outcome anyone wanted, but it did provide new possibilities for the investigation. So, details on when the girls were killed and exactly what happened to them have not been released. Even most law enforcement officers do not have the details. The investigators it's like a very small circle of authorities that know. And they're keeping the details as shielded as possible, so when it comes time to confirm the perpetrator, they'll be able to do so confidently and without any problems in court, which is really, really smart. And for example, this method has already proved effective in identifying false confessions, because they've had false confessions come in from people who are either mentally ill or they're looking for their 15 minutes of fame. And they've been able to rule them out very quickly because they didn't know what actually happened, because no one does. It hasn't been released. What we do know is that the girls were found quite far from any parking areas or roads. Their full clothing, including their shoes, were found. So it's possible that either they walked in there or that they were carried.
Okay.
Either possibility is there. The investigation continued to progress. They expanded cell phone tower search to look for hits in both locations, Evansdale and Seven Bridges, and they expanded their sex offender search to include both of those areas as well. So, double abductions are incredibly rare. Since the 1970s, there had only been 15 in the U.S.
Wow.
And then Lyric and Elizabeth were number 16. So, and just 10 months after that, after Lyric and Elizabeth, number 17 happened, also in Iowa. This was the double abduction of 12-year-old Desi Hughes and 15-year-old Kathleen Shepard by the monster Michael Klunder. Now, we will cover Klunder and his victims, of which there are many, in a separate episode. But it's important to point it out here for reference. So by 2013, there are 17 dual abductions in the U.S. Iowa accounts for 1% of the population, but somehow makes up 17% of all dual abductions in the U.S. Yeah.
Wow.
That's just... it's crazy. So... not only that, not only is Iowa incredibly skewed, but Klunder is known to be responsible for 2 of the 3 dual abductions in the state. Lyric and Elizabeth is still unsolved. Now, spoiler alert, Klunder is dead. He took his own life rather than face any consequences for what he had done.
Dumbass.
Yeah, awful. Ugh.
That's not fair to the families he hurt.
No.
They want vengeance, but that's just not fair.
Right. So authorities immediately started looking into whether he could be connected to the Evansdale case. After a year, one DCI representative stated that they had ruled him out based on location evidence. We're not sure about that, because if the location evidence is based on phone pings, a phone is not attached to your body. Mm-mm. It's not, you can leave it behind. But we're unsure. It's never been released what this location evidence was. So we're unsure exactly what it is. However, the DCI did later back away from that statement that Klunder had been ruled out, saying basically no one is completely ruled out until someone is ruled in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, all right. Moving on. The years continue to pass. In 2013, Dan Morrissey, Lyric's father, was sentenced to 90 years in prison for the drug charges he was facing at the time of the abduction. He will be eligible for parole in 30. Now, again, we're going to cover Klunder completely in the final July episode, so you're not going to have to wait very long. But I have to point out here the irony of Dan's sentence for drugs compared to the fact that before Klunder kidnapped Desi and Kathleen and murdered Kathleen, he had committed multiple violent acts and was sentenced to only 41 years and served less than half of that. So where the fuck are the priorities in our society where drugs send you away for 90 years?
But a child's murder is...
Well, he hadn't committed child murder before this, but
That's
multiple
true, but...
violent acts against
and why is
people. All kinds of people.
Drugs get you 90 years. But like when my uncle murdered my aunt, he only got a year per year she was alive.
Yeah.
And I was like, but he took away a mother, a daughter, an aunt, a sister, a friend.
All of those people, the rest of the years of their lives are impacted.
Yeah.
By him.
But he can go to jail and get out on good behavior, which he hasn't. But how is that fair? Why is it a year for a year?
Yeah, I don't know.
But yet drugs, depends on what. But anyways, not important, but drugs, you get 90 years or, whatever. Yeah. But that's messed up.
Yep. In 2014, Misty Cook, Lyric's mother, was sentenced to 10 years for drug charges. She would only serve a portion of that sentence and was later released. Also in 2014, the FBI released their profile of Lyric and Elizabeth's killer. They felt he must be local because he'd need to be familiar with both Myers Lake and Seven Bridges. And those areas are, not right next to each other. No. He had to have familiarity with both of them. He may have attempted to abduct children or adults in the past, and he had probably made inappropriate contact with, but at the very least had inappropriate fantasies about prepubescent girls. So, everyone's worst nightmare person. That's who that is.
And he was married, wasn't he?
Clunder, yes.
Yeah.
Clunder was married, yeah.
And his wife didn't know anything about any of this.
I don't have much information on his wife.
Because when I was watching, it didn't say much, but I was just like, I just know at one point they're like, well, he called, they called his wife to see if she knew where he was. And she was like, no, he should be here. Anyways. And I'm like, wow, what a fantastic actor he was.
Yeah.
To his own family.
I think he was in some ways.
Wow.
Yeah. In 2016, there were reports of attempted kidnappings all over Iowa, a ton of them. In August, in Colfax, this man approached two, and I had conflicting reports here. They were either 11 or 12 years old, but in that range. Some newspapers said 11, some said 12. But young girls. Offered them $100 to get in his car and come do some yard work for him. So here we've got two girls, and remember this is rare, and yard work for pay was how Clunder got Desi and Kathleen into his truck. So just interesting parallels, almost like he was idolizing Clunder.
I would say, was he a copycat?
Yeah.
Or was he a partner?
Right. So in Colfax, in this particular situation, one girl did get into the car. She was molested over her clothes. She felt uncomfortable. She wanted to get out. And then the stories conflict a little bit as to whether he let her out and dropped her off or whether she escaped when the car stopped or slowed down. But either way, it was an escape.
Wow.
This would be the case that would land him, but not for a few months. So in November now, in Ottawa, he used the same tactic to entice a 6-year-old girl into his car. Thank fuck, she refused. She ran home and told her mom. She just refused and ran, good parenting. These girls know exactly what they're doing. And I'm not saying I am not in any way blaming the parents of any of these other children who he attempted to kidnap. You can teach kids everything, but sometimes they still get curious, or they're very trusting. It's probably because those girls had such a good, safe life that their parents provided for them that they were trusting of this man, and the one girl did get into the car. So I'm not blaming the parents at all there. But this girl ran home and told her mom. Her mom had a friend over at the time, and this man right here is a fucking hero. Austin Kirkpatrick jumped in his car and started chasing the silver car that the little girl had told him about.
Good job.
He called police, and he stayed with the car until they could get there. When confronted, this disgusting piece of shit actually tried to claim that he was an undercover police officer.
So he's false. Oh, police.
Yes. Yeah. And we'll get to that because he does get charged.
I was going to say, don't you get in trouble for that?
Yep. But all this time you've been doing this for almost 6 months, and you didn't have a better story prepared for when someone confronted you.
Because he was invincible.
Yeah. Not that there was a story that would have been believable for someone trying to get an unknown 6-year-old child into their car, but crikey. So police searched the car. They found about a dozen $100 bills, Xanax, and Viagra, which makes my skin crawl. Yeah.
Whoa.
Jeff Lee Altmeyer was a 58-year-old man from Ankeny with a wife, 2 grown children, no priors, and a job that allowed him to travel all over the state. He was charged with a litany of things. including kidnapping and sexual abuse of a minor for the Colfax case, a few counts of enticing a minor, and charges for impersonating a public official and controlled substance unlawful prescription charges. Most of the smaller charges were eventually dropped, like the impersonating a public official and the controlled substance. They dropped those, but he was convicted of first-degree kidnapping, sexual abuse of a minor, and 2 to 3 charges of enticing a minor. The charges on the Iowa courts online, it was kind of hard to tell if some of them were the same ones or different ones, so I'm not sure, but a few counts of enticing a minor. He was sentenced to life in prison. See ya, motherfucker.
Good.
Now, I am super glad that this fuckstick was caught, and I hope he has just a really lovely time in prison, because men like that who go to prison, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
I don't personally think he was involved in the Evansdale case. For the same reason that Drew mentioned in the documentary, criminals like these tend to escalate, not work backwards. He was not great at what he was trying to do. He was fairly obvious. He was driving his own car. You know, he was caught fairly quickly when somebody really got right on it.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's likely that he kidnapped and murdered 2 girls in 2012 and then in 2016 just decided to try and pick up children and let them go. You know, there are some situations. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, he did leave survivors in some of his crime. He didn't always complete murder. Even after his first murder, he didn't always get it done. But he always committed significant violence on his victims. And I just don't think he's a good look for the Evansdale case. However, Altmaier is suspected of attempting to kidnap at least 19 young girls across the state of Iowa.
Wow.
Yeah. In February 2017, the U.S. saw its 18th dual abduction when 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German were taken and murdered in Delphi, Indiana. Is it Delphi or Delphi?
Delphi, I believe.
Delphi. And Candy will be covering that soon. You'll get it this month. So you wanted true crime all month. We're kind of tying all of these together, and you're going to get all the information in July. Of course, this sparked interest in a possible connection to the Evansdale case, but there was none. This case is solved.
It is solved. Well, it is solved, but when I cover it, it made me so mad because anyways, it made me mad. It is solved, but is it solved?
Okay.
At least in my eyes.
Okay. Also in 2017, Drew and Heather finalized their divorce after 25 years together. They are both wonderful people committed to their children. That's all I'm going to say about that. In 2018, the Angels Park Memorial was dedicated at Myers Lake. According to the Elizabeth Collins Foundation, the park was created as a place for one to come, quote, the park was created as a place for one to come to heal after the loss of a loved one, whether to gather in a group, family, or individual. It's a place to walk, to work, to talk to your angels, end quote.
That's sweet.
Yes.
It's sad, but it's sweet that that Elizabeth's family wants
a place for everyone to go who's lost someone. Yes. Every July, the Memorial Ride and Drive starts from Lofty's in Evansdale and stops in several locations in the Cedar Valley, raising money, awareness, and remembrance for Lyric and Elizabeth. In 2023, Misty Cook, Lyric's mother, was arrested on drug offenses but received a suspended sentence. In 2025, she was arrested for conspiracy with intent to manufacture or deliver meth and conspiracy with intent to deliver marijuana. I believe she's currently awaiting trial on these charges. So I think the loss of her daughter just
spiraled.
Yeah,
I mean,
just don't think she had as much of a reason to stay clean as she had.
Was her only child, correct?
I believe so.
Okay,
yeah.
So that would make me
want
to numb the pain.
Yep. Absolutely. In July 2025, last year, there was a news announcement that a new type of DNA testing would be applied to samples from the Evansdale case. This is a new testing method that can separate out different strains of DNA from one small sample. So say you've got some sort of sample, you know there's DNA in there, but testing shows it's from multiple individuals, which would normally make it very difficult to define a profile. This new testing can separate out the strains and deliver DNA profiles of different individuals from one sample. At least that's my very rudimentary understanding of it. I am not a scientist. If anyone knows a bit more about this and would like to expand on it, please contact us. Now, that was a year ago, and I couldn't find any more information on it, but Drew was able to provide us with an update, so I will let him speak to that in our next episode. And as we've already talked about, our next episode will be those interviews with Heather Cook and Drew Collins. Cannot thank them enough again for participating, and they're really wonderful people. I know I keep saying that, but they're just really great, and I'm so sorry for everything that they and their families have gone through.
Exactly. They want to keep their daughter's name alive. They want answers, and they're fighting hard for them. And
the resiliency of them is truly impressive.
Yeah.
So, all right. Thank you for listening, and please tune in on Wednesday for our next episode.
Have a good weekend.
All right. Bye, witches.